My name is Yano, and I'll be prosecuting the case of the state of New York versus Leonora Ashburn. The state of New York is charging Leonora Ashburnham with the cause of the death of husband Edward Ashburnham. Before Edward committed suicide, Leonora allegedly taunted Edward Ashburnham, resulting him to slash his throat with a penknife. The issue with this case is Edward committed suicide and what caused to take his own life. And another issue is why didn't Leonora and Edward have a healthy relationship? Leonora and Edward never had sexual intercourse and lacked on communicating with each other. Edward Ashburnham had many mistresses, which he kept from his wife, Leonora. Leonora, on the other hand, could not divorce him because she was bound by her strict religion, Catholic. The continuous affairs behind her back caused Leonora to control and hate Edward. Leonora later on assumed Edward's heart and the sexual morality desired Nancy, a girl they took care of her for several years. Leonora's rage for her husband leads to the outcome of the death of Edward. From stopping this affair from happening, Leonora tells Nancy what a terrible husband Edward has been with her and destroys Edward's image. Leonora, knowingly Edward dying for love, implores Nancy to give in Edward's desire. And Nancy, knowing after Leonora tells her the reality of their relationship, that she has no feelings towards Edward, and Edward too does not have any feeling for her. When Edward received a telegram from Nancy that she is having fun without him in India, he is crushed that his love of his life does not desire him, and Edward, broken-hearted, commits suicide by stabbing himself. And on part 1, chapter 4, there's an evidence said she just boxed Miss Maiden's ears as she hit her in an uncontrolled access of rage. A hard blow on the side of the cheek in the corridor of the hotel outside Edward's. After Leonora finds out about her husband's multiple affairs, she abuses the mistress physically. This is why she has a motive to harm a person. Especially later on, Edward carries on his affairs with Florence and starts to have feelings for Nancy. Leonora builds feelings to actually harm and take revenge on Edward. By hurting his image and actually hurting Edward's feeling, Leonora tells Nancy Edward is only passionate for sexual intercourse, which makes Nancy not give in to him. This is the cause of intentionally harming Edward, leading to his death. What began as a deep love for Edward was driven to a passionate hate by her basic needs for the rule of her religion and her refusal to give it to her. And that is why Leonora has, instead of getting her husband back, has driven him to death. And on part 1, chapter 4, Leonora says that Leonora could just let herself go far as to box Miss Maiden's ears, but the moment a stranger came along, she pulled herself wonderfully up. She was at first silent, and then the moment the key was disengaged by Florence, she was in a state to say, "So awkward of me. I was just trying to say to put the comb straight in Miss Maiden's hair." In front of everyone, Leonora puts on a confident, powerful woman. This is because Leonora did not want to have an image of an unhealthy relationship. And the strict religion states that Catholics cannot have a divorce. Leonora was born in a Catholic family that has fallen into financial difficulties. Leonora Ashburnham and her husband Edward Ashburnham marriage was arranged by their father, but they failed on having a healthy relationship. And then again on part 1, chapter 4, states that Church of Rome disapproves of divorce, and she quite seriously and naively believed that her church could be such a monstrous and iniquitous institution as to expect her to take on the possible job of making Edward Ashburn a faithful husband. And then there's another quote saying that The matter was one of a divorce case, of course, and she wanted to avoid publicity as much as Edward did, so that she saw the necessity of continuing the payments. Leonora was poor and relied on Edward's money. These two reasons is why Leonora is tied to Edward. Their marriage was not passionate, and they both never desired for love from each other. And on page 51, it says that Edward wanted to preserve the virginity of his wife's thoughts. It states that they didn't have any sexual intercourses while they were together. And then at the end, Edward died and Leonora happily remarried to a man named Rodney Bayham. On page 182, it says that the end was perfectly plain to each of them. It was a perfectly manifest at the stage that if the girl did not, in Leonora's phrase, belong to Edward, Edward must die. The girl must lose her reason because Edward died, and that after a time, Leonora, who was the oldest and the strongest of the three, would console herself by marrying Rodney Bayham. This shows that Leonora is happy that Edward died because she achieved her healthy relationship, which she had dreamed, and also she did not have to divorce Edward to obtain that new life. And under New York statute, section 125.25, a person is guilty of murder in the second degree when, with the intent to cause the death of another person, he or she causes the death of such a person or of a third person. Leonora intentionally planned to torture her husband and take his life to achieve her new relationship she desired to have.
The State of New York versus Leonora Ashburnham. The State of New York is charging Leonora Ashburnham with claim of second-degree murder. Leonora Ashburnham was indicted for making a cause of Edward's suicide, but the statute said that the defendant acted under the influence of extreme emotional disturbance, for which there was a reasonable explanation of excuse. There is an evidence that she had an extreme emotional disturbance. To discuss that, let me talk about how Leonora was treated for many years and how she was betrayed by many people close to her. At the beginning of their marriage, they had a good relationship, but it collapsed when Killside case happened. Leonora became cold and unsympathetic to Edward, and Edward became indifferent to Leonora. It is the first betrayal for her, though Edward continued his affair with other women. This was the betrayal for her. This was the beginning of the life without addressing to him one word of tenderness, and no conversation with Edward for many years in private. And it is the second betrayal for her. And then she wanted to get Edward back for her religion, because she started to take control of financial because the Church of Rome disapproved the divorce. She tried to recover the relationship. She started to take control of financial issues to show that she is trustworthy and hoped he became a faithful husband. But even though she tried, she never came back to her, and moreover, he started new affairs. It made her mentally exhausted. This is the third time she was betrayed by him. The fourth biggest betrayer for her is Nancy. Leonora raised Nancy, and she had loved her maternity. However, she was torn her husband's mind by Nancy. She was torn between her intense maternal love for Nancy and the intense jealousy of Leonie. She became intolerable for everything and became crazy. As prosecutors say, Leonora was tied up by many things such as his husband and religion. This is true, but it does not mean she made a cause of Edward's suicide. Now, I'd like to say that she became crazy because everyone close to her betrayed her. After Edward, Leonora, and Nancy returned to their home from Nauheim, and before Edward committed suicide, Leonora broken down. John Darrell described the situation. Leonora began to have her headaches, and she could speak no word and could bear to hear no sound. Page 164. And the sentence, it never occurred to her that Leonora's expression of agony was for anything else than physical pain. Page 174 also support his part. So, because he was betrayed by Edward and Nancy for a long period of time, she had got extreme emotional disturbance. Again, the statute said the defendant acted under the influence of extreme emotional disturbance for which there was a reasonable explanation or excuse. It can be applied to Eleanor's case, so she's not guilty.
The defendant responded that Leonora was under insanity and caused harm to Edward. But on page 164, it states that Nancy would sit with her, silent and motionless for hours, steeping handkerchief in vinegar and water and thinking her own thoughts. This states that Leonora had planned that she wanted to take revenge on Edward. So that is why she intentionally wanted to harm Edward. And at the end of, on page 195, it states that Leonora went about her daily duties with a sort of triumphant smile. This suggests that Leonora was happy that Edward was tortured, and so she didn't feel any remorse after the death of Edward, and that is why Leonora was not under insanity. Yeah, she actually intentionally caused harm to Edward.
Even though it says thoughts, and it doesn't clearly say what thoughts she had thinking. So she had been thinking. So it does not clearly prove that she was planning how to make a cause of killing Edward. And the triumphant smile is a subjective description by Edward, and as we know, John Doyle is unreliable narrator, so we cannot trust his description. So it also does not prove Leonora is guilty. Thank you.